Hi, I'm Lisa Herbold. I'm your city council member. Nice to meet you.
I'm just in the neighborhood today.
From districts 1 to 7, the Seattle City Council is facing a major turnover. And those aren't the only races to watch, as veterans on King County Council face competitive challengers as well.
This is my toughest race ever.
I did not decide to run against him. We're running for the same position.
We break down the top issues on your ballot.
I think that it's smart to be scared if you're an incumbent.
Get the scoop with our journalist roundtable.
Every single year there's record-setting spending in these races.
We really have a business versus labor showdown here.
An election conversation. Next on City Inside Out. Welcome to this edition of City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. From some high-dollar races on the Seattle City Council to some generational battles on the King County Council, plus 2 Tim Eyman-related state measures, this year's election is a study of local politics, both past and present. This week, we're giving you a pre-Halloween treat as we help get you caught up on some of the biggest races on this November's ballot. You could say the face of Seattle is changing, but it's really 4 faces, at least, changing on the Seattle City Council this fall. Councilmember Lisa Herbold is one of only 3 incumbents running for one of the council's 7 contested seats. In District 1, she's up against public defense attorney Phil Tavel.
I want to work together with people to give them faith that their council member is working for them.
People do want change in this city.
Council President Bruce Harrell is not running again for his District 2 seat, opening the door for community organizer Tammy Morales and SPD Crime Prevention Coordinator Mark Solomon.
I'm the candidate in this race who is ready to hit the ground running.
I am focused on getting results for people.
In D3, it's Socialist Alternative Council member Shama Sawant up against challenger Egan Orion, in a race where the candidates have raised nearly $700,000 between them, and PACs have put in more than $300,000 more to sway the vote.
This election is about winning a progressive city hall.
I can work across organizations and communities to get big stuff done.
In District 4, interim council member Abel Pacheco is not running for the position he took over from Rob Johnson. So it's former city council aide Alex Peterson versus Democratic Socialist Shaun Scott.
For this particular position, the experience is what really matters.
Voters should vote for me because I'm actually one of them.
D5 incumbent Deborah Juarez wants a second term. She's facing attorney Ann Davison-Sattler.
I've delivered everything that I said I would. I'm running because I really want some change.
In District 6, with Mike O'Brien stepping aside, it's current council aide Dan Strauss pitted against former council member Heidi Wills.
I am the candidate for Seattle's future.
People want problem solvers. They want to see results.
And finally, with D7 council member Sally Bagshaw not running again, it's Assistant City Attorney Andrew Lewis taking on former Seattle Police Chief Jim Pugel.
I think that we need a new direction. I have maturity and experience.
The battle between older and younger candidates is a stark division with the King County Council's District 2 seat. 74-year-old Larry Gossett is seeking an 8th term up against 32-year-old challenger Gurmai Zahalai, who won a surprising 56% of the vote in the August primary.
Nobody expected that, including myself.
Zahalai says he respects and admires Gossett, but wants to give District 2 a new voice.
I'm running because I believe the direction that our region has been going for a long time is making life very hard for a lot of people.
Gossett says the primary results surprised him too, but he says his experience makes him the best choice in what he's calling his final run for office.
It will be the last, but there's several projects that I definitely wanted to finish, and without bragging or anything, I'm by far the best person to lead the effort.
And leading the effort for $30 car tabs?
They're just pigs at the trough.
Well, of course, it's Tim Eyman, whose Initiative 976 would slash car tab taxes to $30 per year for any vehicle, getting rid of what he calls an unfair state vehicle valuation system.
They're leaving the voters no choice. If you don't like this dishonest vehicle valuation schedule, 976 is the only way to get rid of it.
Kelsey Mesher of the Transportation Choices Coalition, along with the Seattle City Council, opposes the measure, which TCC says would gut more than $24 billion from transportation projects statewide.
There's a big, broad coalition of people who think this is a horrible idea, and we really hope everyone gets on board.
One of Iman's early initiatives, I-200, which voters passed in 1998 as a ban on affirmative action, is back before voters in another form.
As a legislator, you cannot reverse people's will.
State lawmakers passed I-1000 this past session, bringing back an affirmative action program to help women, people of color, and veterans with job opportunities and college admissions. Opponents are pushing back, and you'll see this as Referendum 88 on your ballot, to say yes or no to I-1000. The no side says voters should have the final say when it comes to what they call preferential treatment.
So basically, the government should be treating people the same, regardless of your race and color.
We have an opportunity in Washington state to right Tim Iman's wrong.
Labor leaders say I-1000 does not establish any quotas for hiring or school admission, and would allow Washington to join 42 other states that have affirmative action policies.
This initiative is consistent with who we are as a state and the values that we hold as Washingtonians, and it is time to restore equity and fairness and opportunity.
From a serious discussion of racial equity to a major overhaul of the Seattle City Council, it's a crowded ballot this fall, with some guaranteed changes in political leadership just ahead. And here we are with Melissa Santos from Crosscut, political reporter there. Melissa, good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
And also we have David Gutman. He is a reporter for the Seattle Times. David, good to have you too.
Thanks for having me.
And of course we have Erica C. Barnett, journalist, founder, and head janitor, I think, of the C is for Crank.
I do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to have you again, Erica.
Good to be here.
I'm going to jump right in with the 7 city council races that are going on this fall. 4 incumbents not running again, and for those who are, there was that recent poll in Crosscut, Melissa, that showed about 7 out of 10 people think the current council is only doing an only fair or poor job. What do you make of that poll? What's happening with the council right now?
I mean, we do see just some general anger in incumbents. I think we see that in legislative races that I cover. I think that's a common thing right now. It is interesting that, the council gets bad reviews. The mayor, people were more split on in our Crosscut Elway poll. So about half of people thought she was doing okay versus people who were disappointed. So that's different. But we also saw results elsewhere talking about the city's response to homelessness, where more than half of people thought it would be okay to revisit some sort of idea of a head tax, which was highly controversial, employee tax that got scuttled. Yeah. And it's one of those things that indicates to me that, sometimes people are just mad at incumbents right now. That's sort of a cultural thing we have going on. It's one thing that's going on.
Yeah, very true. David, though, I want to kind of flip that idea around because all 3 of the incumbents running did win their primaries. I wanted to point that out. And we also have a city council aide, a former city council aide, an assistant prosecutor from the city who won these other races. It doesn't sound completely like voters asking for change. How do you suss that out?
That's a good question. I mean, voters, it seems like people certainly are upset about homelessness. You walk around and you see homelessness. The counts that the county has done show modest increases, which was what some of the incumbents running will tell you. We've made investments in targeted areas and we're making progress. Yeah. On the other hand, there's still some 11,000 people without homes in the county. And so, making progress is great, but I think it doesn't seem fast enough for a lot of voters, and that I think is kind of driving some of the anti-incumbency feelings that you're seeing in the poll.
And homelessness, no matter who you talk to, it is the top issue that people are talking about on the campaign trail. Eric, I know you've studied all of these council races pretty closely. Which of them do you find the most interesting, maybe? What sort of city council do you see emerging from the November election?
Well, there's a couple of things that are really interesting going on. One is that, yes, we will probably have some incumbents reelected. But at the same time, I mean, it's going to be a very fresh-faced city council with a lot of people who don't have a lot of direct legislative experience. So I expect that we'll see a really steep learning curve. If Lisa Herbold is reelected, she'll be one of the more senior people on the council, which is, she's only been there one term.
Amazing,
so that's saying a lot. I think the race that's most interesting to me right now, for a lot of reasons, is District 3, which is Shama Sawant, the incumbent, who got less than, I believe, 40% in her race, which is really, really bad for
lowest of any of the incumbents.
Yeah, and it's pretty unprecedented. Don't quote me on that, but it's pretty unprecedented for an incumbent to come back from that versus Egan O'Ryan, who has had a tremendous amount of money spent on his behalf. So, if he wins, I think it'll tell a couple different stories about both her as a council member and the power of money in politics.
And I want to dive into that. And David, maybe I'll start with you here. This influence of political action committees on these city council races. I know the Times recently reported how Amazon just poured $1 million more into these different council races, more than our city elections have ever seen by a single entity there. Your thoughts on how PACs are influencing this year's races?
Well, I mean, the money is insane. It's huge amounts of money. And Seattle has actually pretty strict campaign finance laws. The limits of what you can donate to a candidate are pretty low. It's $250 or $500 max. We have publicly funded democracy vouchers, which almost every candidate is participating in, and those impose further limits on what you can raise. But all of that is just dwarfed by this outside spending. Amazon is going to spend more on these elections than the candidates that it opposes have raised combined. On the other side, a handful of unions are spending huge amounts of money. And, it's hard to tell what impact it's going to have. But for sure, voters are going to hear, a lot of what they're going to be hearing is not directly from candidates, it's from these outside groups.
Right, and we're just really starting to get those targeted ads coming out. Erica, maybe I'll go to you next. It's been interesting, and David brought this up. We definitely have more candidates running for office, 55 of them, I believe, before the primaries happen, with the help of these city-funded democracy vouchers. So maybe that part of it's working. But with all the PAC money involved, can we really say that democracy vouchers are doing what they set out to do? Is this really a more even playing field? How do you look at it?
Well, I think that in a lot of ways it's not. I mean, when we adopted democracy vouchers in the city, we also adopted new campaign finance regulations that say you can only raise this much money. There are limits on contributions, and there's a limit on how much you can raise and spend total. So in a lot of ways, candidates are outmatched now by these outside groups that are able to dump unlimited amounts of money into these races. I do think it's interesting that candidates who are getting the benefit of this money, from both sides, both Andrew Lewis, who's getting in District 7, who's getting a bunch of money from labor, and Egan O'Ryan and others that are getting money from business. They're saying, well, if I'm elected, I will get rid of these, I will do something about these outsized contributions that helped elect me, which is really interesting.
And I know the council's working on that right now. Councilmember Gonzalez talking about that very recently. If I could, Melissa, I'll go to you. I know you've covered this PAC issue before in a number of different ways. Are you surprised to see such an influence of PAC, business-led, labor-led, influencing these races?
Not really, because we've been seeing that trend. I covered the legislature. We've been seeing every single year there's record-setting spending in these races, and that's been happening, I think ever since PAC spending was kind of unleashed by Citizens United, that court decision. And so we're seeing that. I don't study the city stuff as much, but I'm not surprised because all of politics, even when it's not about Seattle, lately seems to center around Seattle. In races that are on the east side. A couple years ago, we had a really important one that decided to control the state Senate, and it was, and then Sawant was appearing in the ads against this candidate that they have nothing to do with one another, right? So that's a boogeyman that has been used in other parts of the state, and whether it's effective or not, I'm not sure. But it comes up a lot, and when I cover Olympia as Seattle politics, and so businesses that aren't even, have reach outside Seattle are worried about Seattle, and so I'm not surprised to see the money coming into these races.
That's a big piece of it. Thank you for bringing that up. Melissa, let me stay with you, and I'll move on to county council here. Some would call this a generational battle for Larry Gossett, 74-year-old District 2 council member looking for an 8th term, versus 32-year-old Gurmai Zahilai, won big in the primary, Zahilai did. We also have Jeannie Cole-Wells, an older candidate going up against Abigail Durr. What do you make of one or both of these races here? There are 4 up, but those 2 are generally the most competitive.
Particularly for Gurmai, I think that it reflects that the district has changed a lot. Larry Gossett has a huge history in the community. He was a civil rights activist, and still, I mean, to some extent, it has been fairly recently. Really well known for that work in the late 60s. And but there's people who've moved to South Seattle. District 2 is very large, actually, for the county council. So all of these parts of Seattle that aren't familiar with that history, or it's not super relevant to them now when they're concerned about gentrification getting pushed out, and that's something that Gurmai is talking about a lot. And Larry cares a lot about it too, but there's not the same. I think there's just new people, new voters, that aren't as connected to Larry. So I think that message of the new message is resonating in a way it might not have in years past.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I know the District 2 and the Seattle districts, at least, very recently, the Times reported that it was a majority white, which is first time in a long time. David, maybe I can move on to you with this one. I thought you wrote a great piece a few months ago. Why are so many people turning out for the city council job, but not as many for the county council, which actually pays more? Really interesting twist here.
It's a good question, and I appreciate the praise, but I'm not sure that piece really answered the question. Part of it is I think what Melissa just mentioned, that even in state legislature races, for some reason Seattle politics are central. The homelessness issue gets centered in Seattle, but it's a county-wide issue without a doubt, and even region-wide. And the county, controls more funds to address this issue. So it is a little perplexing. We have 7 city council races. They're all competitive. They drew 50-some candidates. We have 4 county council races. 2 of them are not at all competitive.
Right.
The 2 that you mentioned are competitive. But in those 2 races, even, they're both generational, as you said, but the candidates agree on an awful lot. If they might not say this, but they'd probably vote on the same side of issues 90+% of the time. So it's really kind of, you're not seeing the sort of divisions that you're seeing in Seattle politics.
Some difficult choices there for sure. And Erica, I'm looking at this, and I really see this county council job as perhaps being even more important next year as the county starts working more closely with the city, with this regional homeless authority there. I wanted to ask you about that. If you see some change coming to the King County Council, or what do you see coming out of this?
Well, I think the King County Council is going to be a more important job. I think part of the reason that you hear about the City Council is in part because of media coverage. It focuses so heavily on what the City Council is doing, and I don't know why that is, but it's always been the case that the County Council is, seen as kind of confusing and boring, and they deal with the sewers and, but I do think that, I would characterize the Regional Homelessness Agency as more of almost a takeover of the city's authorities by the county. So I think the county is going to end up having a lot more power than maybe even the city is aware that it will once this all shakes out. So I think that, maybe hopefully we'll be covering them more, because I blame myself as part of that too. I don't cover the county council nearly as much as I would like to.
Yeah, you're right though. That job is going to be changing very soon here. I'm going to try to pick up the pace ever so slightly, and we'll see how this works here. But I'm working on Tim Eyman's I-976 measure for $30 car tabs, and I've heard a lot of different perspectives on it. Want to see if it's got a shot at passing here. A lot of organized opposition to it. David, any thoughts to start?
Well, I think it certainly has a shot at passing. There is, all of the money at this point is against it, but that's sort of been the case historically with a lot of Eyman initiatives. He raises money to get things on the ballot, and then there's a lot of organized opposition against them. But once they're on the ballot, it's kind of no one knows what's going to happen.
Right.
And it's a huge issue. In some of these city council races, I was at a Seattle City Council debate a couple weeks ago, and both candidates basically said, the most important thing on the ballot is not our race, it's I-976.
Right.
And they're both like, make sure you vote no on 976. It's a huge issue.
District 6, I remember that one well. Great pickup there. Maybe I can have you comment on this one. Melissa, your thoughts?
I think that people have liked in the past the $30 car tabs idea, certainly in Washington State, so it has resonance and could it possibly could pass, but there is a lot of organized opposition to it. Groups have spent It's already $3.1 million has been spent against it. I mean, Microsoft's donated $600,000 to try and fight it, and Amazon donated more, 100,000 or more too, maybe 200. So there's really a lot of organized opposition, and that could be enough to kill it. And one thing they're emphasizing is that maybe the Sound Transit taxes are unpopular. You don't see that in any of the No on I-976 ads. They emphasize local bridge projects and local roads and potholes and things like that will be hurt.
Yeah, and definitely happening in Seattle too. Erica, I know that Tim Eyman was right in front of the council not too long ago. He's actually been doing the council tour, it looks like, going to a few of them around the state here. Your thoughts of that interaction between city government and a state issue here with what Tim Eyman's talking about?
Well, what's really interesting, I haven't been able to get a hold of the exact numbers, but there's polling apparently out that shows that once people are generally a little more opposed than they were initially as they're starting to get this messaging, but the messaging that is most effective is the messaging that they're using, which is, you may think that this is just sticking it to Sound Transit and sticking it to Seattle, but actually it's going to cut your road project, it's going to cut your bridge project, it's going to cut your local buses, which a lot of people use. So I think the more that people emphasize, the more that the campaign emphasizes that aspect of it, the more effective they're going to be.
David, do you have something else?
Yeah, and this is a statewide vote,
right?
And Sound Transit is not statewide. Sound Transit is, regional parts of King, Snohomish, and Pierce counties,
right? And
so, part of the strategy here, I think, with the opponents of this initiative is we don't want to run statewide ads saying, this will kill Sound Transit, because part of the reason is we don't want people statewide to think they're paying Sound Transit taxes, which they're not.
Right.
But, you pay a lot of taxes, you can get confused about what exact taxes you're paying. So, it's people statewide who are not paying Sound Transit taxes, but, in this initiative certainly have the chance to really kick the knees out from under Sound Transit.
Yeah, interesting point. And I thought earlier you were about to say, I'm having trouble getting a hold of Tim Eyman, which is impossible. That's not possible. Just checking. He's probably hiding in the studio somewhere. Don't say his name too loud. Melissa, let me go to you. I'm going to talk about Referendum 88, asking voters to approve or reject Initiative 1000. This one's a little confusing. Make sure you read this fully on your ballot here. This is the measure that would set some affirmative action standards in our state. We are one of very few states that do not have an affirmative action standard. How do you think voters are going to fall on this issue?
I think it's interesting because unlike I-976, I don't think that a lot of money so far has been spent on ads to try and convince people, because when it comes to issues of race and discrimination, people have their opinions, and I think they're hard to move. So that certainly voters in Washington state approved the former ban on affirmative action in state programs. That was approved, but it's been 21 years. So the question is whether minds have changed, whether the electorate's changed. And I think it could be repealed. I mean, I think that if I-1000 passes, it repeals that 1998 initiative. I think it could happen, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't go through, because I think that everyone should be treated fairly is the message of the opposing campaign. I mean, whether or not you agree that's accurate or would apply here, I mean, it's a message that people can generally nod their heads to. And I don't know how that one will turn out, honestly.
Yeah. And the labor movement, I know, is putting a lot of money into the yes side, so that's a big piece of it, too. David, any thoughts on this one? Really, it's a bit of a confusing issue for people to break down.
Sure, it isn't. I think one of the interesting things is that, what the supporters are trying to do is re-legalize affirmative action, which has been outlawed in Washington state for 20 years or so. And affirmative action, would allow women and people of color to get some sort of edge in hiring, in contracting, in college admissions. The opposition is led by groups that are largely, if not predominantly, Asian American, which I think is interesting. And I'm not quite sure exactly what to make of it, but this is a measure that's attempting to boost people of color, and yet the opponents are also people of color who are saying, we don't want this.
Yeah, very interesting. Have you checked on this one at all, Erica?
Not closely. I mean, I would just add that at the national level, you're seeing the same trend where a lot of the lawsuits are being filed not by white people, but by Asian American people. I don't know if that's a cynical political effort or if the conversation is really shifting in that direction. But that is very interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
Part of the conversation for sure. I need to start wrapping up here. This has been great, and I really appreciate the time. Maybe a political race or an issue that we haven't talked about yet, one you've been covering that might be important for voters to think about this November. Any thoughts?
All those advisory votes on your ballot don't actually mean anything. They don't do anything. But just so you know, there's maybe 12 of them. There's a bunch.
There's a ton of them, right?
Yeah, because Democrats got control of the legislature and they passed some stuff, and some of them are small. It doesn't do anything. That's all people should know.
All right, Tim Eyman, once again, coming back to haunt us. Any thoughts, David, as we start wrapping up here?
Not to focus too much on the city council again, but I think it's going to be fascinating. We really have a business versus labor showdown here with huge money on both sides, and I'm going to be really interested to see who comes out on top.
Yeah. Do you have a feel at all for these races? Seem pretty tight in some of these different cases.
I think a lot of them are really tight, and I wouldn't hazard a guess to predict.
All right, just checking in. Erica, final thoughts here, maybe on the council or another issue?
Well, I'm mostly looking for those mailers in my mailbox this year. I got a ton of them. I mean, like a stack an inch thick of negative ads, and so I'll be interested to see what tactics get used in the general election, and what case that business and labor folks are making.
Yeah, I just want in terms of the incumbents you've been talking to, I know you talk to them all the time, scared? How are they going forward with their different campaigns? It's a really interesting time for them.
I would say they are scared. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's smart to be scared if you're an incumbent. But I think Shaun who this is just my opinion. I have not talked to her about this, but I think she's running scared from those numbers. But I think all three of the incumbents that are running are very much not taking this race for granted.
Or should they? Thank you all very much for your input here, and we will be right back.
I care about homelessness.
Housing and homeless.
I don't really care about my car tabs.
I think climate change is the most important issue.
We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Before we close today, it's time for our weekly CIO poll. What's your most important decision for the 2019 general election? The Seattle City Council races? The King County Council ones? Referendum 88 to approve Affirmative Action Initiative 1000? Or $30 car tab initiative 976? We want to know what you think. Cast your vote and weigh in with your comments at our website, seattlechannel.org/cityinsideout. While you're there, you can watch our programs online anytime. Coming up next time, the controversy over vaping. Washington State has banned flavored vapes temporarily in the aftermath of recent vaping-related health problems and even deaths. Local e-cigarette companies are scrambling as lawmakers promise to take up a permanent ban next year. We clear the air next time on City Inside Out. I hope you join us.